All right, here we are. Jonese, first of all, thank you for joining me, taking time out of your schedule to be here. I'm really excited that you're here. I know when I sent out emails, I was like, hey, like I'm starting this new thing. Would you be a part of it? I never take it for granted that people say yes. And I think it's really dope to hear people's stories. So I'm really excited to have you on She Will Not Fall.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So, like I told you before we started recording, because I say it to everybody, and everybody who's listening, you'll probably gotten adjusted by now. We start with the social media trend, how it started versus how it's going. So the how it started is your story. So just kind of walk us through your story and then lead us up to that defining moment for you where you kind of reevaluated your faith and maybe shifted in some viewpoints. So tell us a little bit about who you are.
So I am Deirdre Jonese Austin. I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, born and raised. I still consider Charlotte home, although I'm living in Atlanta now, and I will get to why I'm in Atlanta. But grew up in a strong Christian household, strong Baptist household, mom, dad, sister. We went to church on Sundays. My parents have always served in the church. So growing up, my dad was a deacon in the Baptist church in which we grew up, which is also the church we're at now, but that's also part of the story. And my mom was the lead over the youth ministry at the time. So I've always been active and engaged in the church. Got baptized when I was young. I think I was 4 years old when I got baptized. Been serving the Lord ever since. But we started there, I think maybe when I was in around third grade. We ended up moving churches, started going to a non-denominational megachurch plant, black megachurch plant in Charlotte at that time. So we were there for a few years. I'd say that was really impactful in my experience. I was on the dance ministry there, and I was the youngest one on the dance ministry. So it was all adults. It was there that I was able to grow in my own relationship with God and able to take ownership of that in some regards. It was also there that I learned some theology that I look back on and I'm like, oh wow, that was prosperity gospel, or that was purity culture, or that's not quite as affirming as it could have been. So it was what I needed in some regards at that time. And I'll say I think all of my life experiences have played a role in getting me to where I am. So also in high school, went to a white-led, multiracial, non-denominational church, which is also a part of my experience, part of my story, experienced some, I guess, microaggressions there. But all along, this is part of my faith journey. Also, learning who I am as it relates to my career and vocational journey. So I've always been passionate about helping people. Like growing up, my mom would sit us down, we'd watch CNN. So Lisa Ling's My America was a show I remember watching growing up. So seeing all that's going on and thinking, okay, I need to do something to help. So having that in the background, thinking in terms of what I wanted to do, I was also in our Charlotte-Mecklenburg Youth Council in high school, which is basically a group of high school students who meet together, talk about different issues, and also get to meet with different elected officials. So we meet with the school board one week, or the city council one week. So all of this is going on in the background. So I decided that I wanted to study international business because I was in a certain culture, certain type of church culture, and I wanted to make money. And I was going to be a millionaire or a billionaire, and that was the goal. Realized that what was more important to me was helping people. Decided to go into international politics, which is what ended me at Georgetown, which is where I went in undergrad. And I graduated from high school in 2015. So how old am I now? I'm 23 now. So this is all pretty recent.
This is recent, yeah.
Yes. So I ended up at Georgetown. I've decided that I am going to be Secretary of State someday. That is what I'm going to do. But I'm not in a lot of like the international relations, international politics courses. I'm involved in a lot of the Protestant ministry courses, involved in some of like the social justice organizations, a lot that had to do with the Black students on campus. So I was on the planning committee for a Black Women's Summit we had at Georgetown. So I get there, I took, what was the course? I think the course was international relations, and we basically went through like game theory, and I was like, I can't do I can't do international relations because I don't want anybody's blood on my hands type of thing.
Right.
And like, I'm passionate about my faith, I'm passionate about social justice, so like, what do I do with this now? And our school, I was in the School of Foreign Service, had a major, culture and politics, which was basically a create your own major type of thing. So I ended up getting to study the intersections of religion and social justice, specifically religion and racial justice. So yeah, I was able to do something that I was passionate about. Um, let's see. I feel like the story is not quite in order, but I'm trying to get all the pieces out. So I was at Georgetown. Everything was going well. I think it was my junior year. I always came home for the summer. So I have like different summer internships, which also started to be international relations related. So like the City of Charlotte's Office of International Relations, the Charlotte World Affairs Council, and then they shifted to ministry. So I interned at Myers Park United Methodist Church. So shifting in my focus areas. But it was my junior year, I think, winter of my junior year. My dad had a routine hernia surgery, and he ended up passing away January 2nd, 2018. So at this point in time, I'm passionate about faith and social justice, but like my goal is to go and get my Master's of Human Rights, still hoping to go into some sort of international relations field. But once my dad passed away, that was the time I accepted my call to ministry, ironically, which was something I had been running from the entire time. But it was also, I guess I'd say, a pivotal moment in my faith journey because, again, some of the things that I've been learning, I knew that God was this God who answers prayers, and like whatever you want to ask for, God will provide it. Even if it's a house, a car, whatever you need, God will provide. So when my father passed, I was praying, believing, trusting that God would heal him. And I don't think it actually hit until we got to the hospital and they let us know that he had passed away. So that was, I guess, a pretty defining moment in my faith journey. The faith that I thought I had, it couldn't get me through that. So I had to come to a new understanding of who God is for me, which is, and this was also the topic of my trial sermon. So graduated from Georgetown 2019, was licensed in 2019 at the church that I covered for my undergrad thesis. It was on the Black Church and Social Justice, so 19th Street Baptist Church. But it's God as El Roy, which is the God from the scripture in Hagar, the God who sees. God is one who sees us amid our pain, and God is one who sees us even amid the oppression and marginalization we may experience in society, which was really important and significant when I ended up interning at the women's prison. So fast forward, well, not fast forwarding that far, but like 2019, I started at Candler School of Theology at Emory University, which is where I am now, which is also why I'm in Atlanta. So I guess this gets into a little bit of where I am now. But yes, came down to Candler, knew I wanted to intern at the women's prison, had that experience, such a great experience. being able to help people find God amid their situation, and then also learning like what it means to sit with people in pain and suffering, and resisting the urge to be like, oh, it's going to be okay, like God's gonna work it out, because in a prison context, you don't know if it's going to be okay. You don't know if it's going to work out. You don't know when they're going to be able to get parole. You don't know when they're going to be able to get out. All that you can say is, God is with you. So that was an important part of the journey. But yes, where I am now, I'm in seminary. I am approaching my 3rd year of my Master of Divinity program, getting certificates in Black Church Studies and Baptist Studies. Also, pretty much finishing up an internship at the historic Ebenezer Baptist Church.
Yeah. So one of the reasons why I really wanted to talk to you was because, so for everybody out there, like we met on Twitter and like in my personal opinion, we have like the dopest community on Twitter, like of people that we engage with and talk to, especially about theology and things of that nature. And one of the reasons why I wanted to reach out to you, because you are pretty vocal about how seminary has changed your perspective on a lot of things. So can we dive into a little bit of that? Like, so you come to seminary and you were already starting your evolution before seminary, but like now in the midst of seminary, you are really tackling some things head on. Like, I can't believe I was thinking that. Like, so walk me through some of the things that seminary has kind of helped you with and deconstructing in some ways from.
Yes. Okay. Well, I came into seminary. I've always been passionate about social justice. So I wouldn't say I was, how did I describe myself? I would say that I was fiscally liberal and socially conservative. That's how I would have described myself coming into seminary. And I think that's how a lot of Black church folks tend to be in some regards. So I can remember there was a church. I forgot the name of the church. But they're a social justice, multicultural church, women pastors here in Atlanta. And I remember visiting one Sunday, and they were talking about, it was reflections from participation in the Pride Parade. And I can remember thinking, oh, like, they're a little bit too liberal and progressive for me. Like, I'm not at that level yet. And this was coming into seminary, so really only a few years ago. But people approach seminary differently. I say that I came open to learning and growing, and open to whatever the experience would bring. So I think it was we're required to take biblical studies courses. And I'd say that's been like the primary motive behind changing and evolving theology. So getting to learn about the Old Testament and the New Testament, and just reading through the scriptures, and the professor being like, well, this is how we use Sodom and Gomorrah, but that's not what it really means. It's not. It's actually about inhospitality, being inhospitable to strangers. So you have these things, and they're like these nuggets where the professor will be like, this is what you think it means, but this isn't actually what it means. So being able to sit with that and sit in that, being able to seek out other resources, videos, and even listening to the experiences of my classmates. So I came in, I was a love the sinner, hate the sin type of Christian. I've since realized that that is not an affirming stance to take. So being able to say, okay, homosexuality was added to the Bible, being able to look in the context and understand, and this is about understanding the context of the Bible around sexuality more broadly, it's been an experience, but it's been an important one in that regard. So learning like the Bible isn't necessarily talking about homosexuality, but learning a lot of the things that we have read into the Bible that isn't necessarily in the Bible. So that's one example. And then hearing my classmates from the LGBTQ spectrum share about their experiences, their calls to ministry, their challenges in understanding their calls to ministry, and just recognizing that if God calls someone, who am I to say that you're not called to ministry? Mm. Reading the Bible and being like, the Bible doesn't say that that's a sin. It's not in there. It was added there. So who am I to add stuff to the Bible? Or even now looking at sexuality broadly, what does the word porneia mean in the Bible for sexual immorality, which has often been interpreted as sex before marriage? That's like my topic now. I'm still doing the readings, still unpacking it. But from what I've read so far, it was not talking about sex before marriage. I don't think the Bible ever condemns sex before marriage. And there's all different types of relationships in the Bible. So coming from a place where the Bible is inerrant and infallible and God said it, we believe it, that settles it, and taking the Bible as, I guess, just taking it as a book and now being able to say, okay, there's more to the Bible than this. There's a specific purpose and intention with which each book was written. There's a specific audience that the book was written to, and realizing that all of these things are important in understanding how we read the scripture. And then also recognizing that seminary has been the changing point for me, having access to these resources and this knowledge, and realizing that if I was not in seminary, I probably would not be changing and evolving theologically, because I didn't have access to it. No one in the circles that I was in was talking about it. So also being like, okay, I have all of this seminary knowledge. How do I bring this to people who won't necessarily come to seminary? And being able to find liberation and freedom in the scriptures, like decolonizing the scriptures. So like the body's always separated from the soul, and being able to live into the both and. That's become like my favorite thing. We can have the body and we can have the soul, and there's space for the sacred and secular within each person, because we don't have to have all of these divisions. That's a result of colonialism. So yes, it's been a journey, and it's a journey I am still on, and it's a challenge in some regards, because I know that a lot of what I've grown up thinking and people around me think is different. I'm in a different place theologically now. So it's like, okay, yeah, do I do this? And there aren't necessarily a lot of like progressive church communities out there. So also thinking about like, I'm in Atlanta now. I'm grateful for Ebenezer. We consider ourselves America's Freedom Church, consider ourselves being a church rooted in Black liberation theology. There's some room in areas of growth, but it's been a good place for me where we can have these topics, we can have sessions in church around like sexuality and things like that. But thinking like, I won't always be here. I'm hoping to go back to Charlotte. So like, are there churches there within the Black church context that I could see myself at that would fit where I am theologically? I don't know. So yes, it's an exciting and difficult space to be in.
And I think a lot of people, that's where many of us are, where especially if your preference is the Black church context. Yes. I was talking to somebody the other day. I was like, Black people and Black churches especially, I don't know if Black evangelicals is appropriate, because I just feel like that word, no, but let's just say Black Christian churches. They are extremely conservative in a lot of ways. So when you have kind of rooted yourself in progressive theology, you feel like the lone person out, because even when you're talking to them, you're like, no, that's not what that means. Yes. And then they're like, no, but it's the word of God. And that's what, and you're like, well,
yes. You went to seminary and you lost your Jesus. You lost the Holy Spirit. Yes. You don't have it anymore.
You don't know him no more. Like that's, like, so I think that's where a lot of people are. And, like I serve at a church that is multicultural, but it is definitely progressive theology. It's led by a Black pastor. So there are elements that have, Black church culture to it. But I want to see blackity black church be completely like progressive in theology. And you're right, it is really hard to find that because of your age and you're younger, and statistically your generation. I was reading this article that I'm a millennial, so I'm older than you, but my generation, your generation, we basically not going back to the church house. Like we just like, no, we good. And you have decided to kind of take this course, like with your life, and taking up this cause. How do you see that looking for you, like for your generation? And I know you're like, I want to help people, like even being creative outside of a church context. Because I remember I went off on a tangent one day on Twitter, was like, if I could drill anything, that's part of the reason why I started this podcast, is because I just want to drill into women who are called. You do not have to rely on a church space in order to do what you've been called to do, right? Like if it's in you, do it. Like if you're like, I'm a congregational care pastor, you can still be a congregational care pastor outside of a church. Like there are ways to go about that. So how do you see yourself, like once seminary is done, like what are some things that you're looking to, like, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to help people in my generation and older generations, just to really help people. What's the goal?
That's a great question. I'm currently in the process of filling out an application for a Forum for Theological Exploration grant that can help me answer that question. Because I know like broadly, Black Christian women is my focus. Sexuality, agencies, bodies, addressing purity culture, and then also like single Black Christian women and relationships. So I know like, okay, that's at the basic level. But now it's imagining, discovering what that looks like in context and in practice. So I'm looking into PhD programs. Applying for PhD is the plan as of now. But being able to bridge the academy and the ministry spaces. So I can do the research, develop the theories, make the suggestions, and then I can go and put these suggestions into practice. So I think it would be nice to be a senior pastor someday, but I'm a Black woman in the Baptist church. So we will see. But then also looking at, there's always the possibility of church plants, but then again, I'm a Black woman, so are the resources going to be there? So yeah, having to navigate, okay, what it is that I want to do, knowing that like people don't like to have these conversations, and like this makes church people uncomfortable, knowing that at the end of the day I also have to like pay my bills. So yes, there's a lot of like, okay, what is this going to look like, which is part of my plan for the grant, if I get it, is to do informational interviews with people who do this type of work. So like public theologians, professors, pastors. There's a womanist church, I think it's called The Gathering, in Texas. So looking into what does it mean to create a womanist worship space. Looking at speaking with Christian sexologists and sex therapists. So speaking of all of these different people who hopefully help me be able to say, okay, this is what I want to do. This is what it's going to look like. These are the resources, the knowledge, the experience, the certifications that I will need to make this happen.
Yeah. I think you kept saying, but I'm a Black woman. And I just really want to be honest right there, because the struggle be real. Like it doesn't matter any part of ministry that you serve in. A lot of times that's one of the things you're like, but I'm a Black woman.
Yes.
So I already know, like, and because of a lot of the topics that you want to cover, you'll be called everything. Jezebel, you'll be called it. Like, just like, and I know you've already braced yourself for that. Like, But you just know that comes with
Yes.
the
I
territory.
haven't fully braced myself, which is why, like, at times I'm scared to say what I want to do because I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
no.
So I'm gonna put on like my big sister hat. Like, so let me just say, I know that it will be challenging days. Um, it is going to be some days you may feel like, okay, was this the right decision? Like, is this, I don't know, maybe I should just go back, do corporate or do something else. Like, but I really feel like there are people who need to hear your voice and there are people who are yearning for that. Like, I was reading just about John the Baptist the other night. And I was like, the thing that's powerful to me is like, he's described as like this lone voice in the wilderness, and people came to where the truth was.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like, so that's what I think of when I'm like, when the days are hard, people need you. Like, people need to hear that. They need that liberation. They need that freedom. And so that will be the thing that will keep you going, because yeah, there gonna be days you're gonna want to cuss people out. Like, it's gonna happen.
I'm grateful that every now and then I'll tweet something and someone will be like, "Yeah, I needed to hear that," and I'm like, "Whew," because there are days where I'm like, I don't really like this. I don't want to do ministry. It's not fun. It's challenging. It's hard work. Maybe I should do something else. I should. There are other things. This isn't it. And then it's like, okay, someone got something. So I'm in the right place. I'm doing the work that, in Katie Cannon's words, my soul must have.
Yes, I love it. So for young women who are basically where you are, and they're like, I'm kind of feeling this shift, and I really want to do this. Like, what are some words of advice that you can give them as they either are starting this journey or they're kind of thinking about it, but maybe a little scared to do it?
I say go for it. Go in the direction to which you feel called. And then I think what's been helpful for me is just situating myself within the genealogy of like Black women in ministry. So knowing there are women who came before me, there are women who will come after me, and the women who came before me braved everything and put in the work so that those who are to come that have it just a little bit better. So thinking in terms of that, having role models, people that I can look up to and be like, wow, like she is doing the work. She's created a space for herself doing the work. She's doing the work within the institution. So even just finding those few people who are like sources of hope. So like there are many Black women Baptist senior pastors, but there are like 3 or 4. There are some. They do exist. So it is possible. And then I think I've also been learning more about like abolition. So police and prison abolition, and like the need to imagine things beyond what we may be able to understand or beyond what we may be able to see now. So being able to imagine finding yourself within a space, knowing that if it's not out there, you can create it, and trusting. And this is also for me as well, because I struggle with this, trusting that if God calls you to it, that the doors will open and God will provide the provision.
Absolutely. I love to me, like, the theme of that is the community is important. Like, really connecting with other women. Like, literally, there would be days I was like, I'm in this thing by myself. But then I found, whether it's online or whatever it is, like, it may not be in person, but it could be people that you connect with through the social media worlds, who are just where you are, or maybe they're just starting out just like you. So at least you kind of have somebody to kind of bounce some ideas off of and just be like, this is where I'm at today. I don't know if this is right, but this is where I'm at. Yeah. So for people who are like, oh my gosh, I think she's dope, how can people support you? How can people follow you? What are you working on, if anything, that people can be a part of? Or if it's just simply following you on social media?
I am in between projects as I try to figure out what I'm gonna do with my life. But people can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Deirdre Deidre Jonese Jonese, and I have a website, Deirdre Deidre Jonese Jonese Austin AUSTIN.com. So you can find it's going to have to be redeveloped and revamped as I go into different directions, but you can find my writing there. So I enjoy doing writing. I have a blog, haven't used it lately, but yes. And also stay up to date on my life happenings there, and also on social media. So yes.
I love it. So Janice, thank you for just giving us who you are and telling us who you are, and even being honest with, like, I'm still trying to get there. I'm still unpacking some things, because I think that that's important too, for people to hear. And I just really wanted women and men, because I hope men are listening to this podcast too, because hello, for them to hear stories and journeys and things of that nature. So I'm really grateful that you took time out of your schedule to be here. It means a lot.
Thank you. I'm so grateful that you've invited me and to be in this space with you.
Awesome. Well, to those who are listening or watching, thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you gained something from this episode. I know I did. And we'll catch you on the next one.